Hi guys, so I owe you a video. I've been telling you that I have a spin-off video from my Cassian's Gonna Die YouTube video, and this one is based on Nesta post-Cassian if he dies. So jumping right in, we know that SJM never intended for Nesta to end up with Cassian. Originally she was gonna put her with Lucian, but decided against it because thought their personalities would clash. And in book 1, as we know, Feyre painted flames on Nesta's dresser drawer. But it wasn't just any flames, it was orange flames. Autumn Court flames. Which is funny because Lucian actually hails from the Day Court. His mother hails from the Autumn Court, but in Prythian, as we know, the only bloodline that really matters is your father's, unfortunately. I apologize in advance for all the pauses. I'm still trying to work out this whole video thing. But anyways, I think that SJM is going to actually circle back to the whole dresser thing. As we know, Feyre ended up with Rhys because she painted the night sky, because he was sending her like subliminal messages when she was human that she didn't know about, and vice versa. I think that also happened with Elaine because Lucian was living in spring her entire life. I think that's why Feyre painted flowers on hers and why she loves gardening so much, because he was literally living in the spring court her entire life. As for Nesta, we never really got any hint as to why orange flames were on her dresser. And as I just said before, we know that she was supposed to end up with Lucian, but Lucian was also changed to hail from the Day Court. So SJM could easily circle back. And I'm going to bring up Eris. You know, Eris, the guy that proposed to her, the guy that's the heir of the Autumn Court, the guy that had this epic, tension-filled, amazing dance with her during the ball in the Court of Nightmares. That male, who is acquainted with orange flames because he hails from the Autumn Court. So if Cassian does die, I think Nesta could end up with Eris still. And the clues that make me believe that is, first of all, the whole Night Court seems to hate Eris because of Beron and how he wears a mask, kind of like Rhys did under the mountain, to be the bad guy when he's not really the bad guy. But that hatred would extend to all of the inner circle. We see Azriel hating him for what he did to Mor. That's a whole other thing, which we know she's lying about. But we see Azriel hate him, Mor hate him. Rhys is kind of indifferent because he has to work with him. And Cassian hates him because Eris and Cassian, you know, they call each other names and they claim to hate each other and all that, but I think they really kind of see each other because of their upbringings. Which is another reason that I think Nesta could end up with Eris, because in Akasif, Cassian is the only person that tells Eris straight to his face, like, I see you, I know you're not a bad person. Like, he insinuates that he knows that he's hurting because of Beron, and tells him he's not a bad guy. And to me, that just seems like, not like Cassian giving his blessing to Eris, but I think it was very interesting that Sarah put that dance in between Nesta and Eris, and how Eris like was immediately in love with her and wanted to propose to her, and how Nesta was kind of taken by him, but also she had a mate, so obviously she was going to be loyal to Cassian because she felt the mate bond. But the point that she made Cassian be the one to see Eris out of everyone else, like the guy that Eris is calling a bastard and everything, that to me just stood out as, you know, if he's telling him he's not a bad guy, I don't think he would mind Nesta being with someone like that. bother having an entire book with a different couple if they're not going to end up together? Because of storyline purposes. Nesta needed to find her mate in Cassian just as much as Cassian needed to find his mate in Nesta, because Nesta had to basically find her redemption and find her place in Prythian and overcome her depression. And her finding the Valkyries was because she was in the Night Court. Her finding the Valkyries was because Cassian was essentially her mate. That's why she stayed there. Whether she wanted his attention or not at first, we all know that's pretty much why she stayed in the Night Court. So that led to her redemption story. Not to mention that Sarah had to write Nesta into the Night Court because of the whole Phazan pregnancy thing, and how we all know that was stupid, but that's how she saw Nesta getting her full redemption, by helping Feyre, giving up her powers for her and Nyx to survive. And yeah, that's just how she wrote it. I don't know. I feel like there were a lot of better choices that could have been made. But she's in the Night Court, and that was that. It was for storyline purposes. And if Cassian does die, Eris is a possibility. As we've seen, she did give up her Fey powers, but Nesta is still a witch in canon. She's a witch. In ACOWAR, Nesta asks Mor what the difference between a fairy and a witch is, and Mor says that witches amass power beyond what they can hold inside themselves, and they use archaic tools and spells to do that. And who is the one person that we know who has used archaic tools to get something done? Wait, I'll let you think for a minute. Nesta. She wielded the Dread Trove, and the Dread Trove are the most archaic artifacts in Prythian, in that Fey world. Not only that, but when she made that bargain with the Cauldron to give back her Fey powers to save Rhys, well, technically Rhys, but Feyre and Nyx, that just proved that she was a witch, because she could wield it. And you have to remember that we don't know a lot about Eris. I know a lot of you might come at me and be like, mates are supposed to be equals, and Nesta is Cassian's equal because he's also walked beside death his entire life, and she had death powers. But that never really tracked to me. I never really saw Nesta and Cassian being equals. Even in power, I know he's one of the strongest Illyrians, blah, 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 he has siphons, but so is Azriel. They're the two most powerful Illyrians. And I don't think Cassian is anywhere close to as powerful as Nesta was, especially with Cauldron power, so that never kind of made sense to me. And we don't know a lot about Eris. We do know that Lady Autumn did hail from the Autumn Court, and she was a member of this very elite family, which is why her parents wanted her to marry Beron. So there's a very real possibility that Lady Autumn could be a witch. Again, we don't know a lot about her. I feel like Sarah's really building something there, though, because she did appear a lot. Starting in ACOTAR, when she helped Feyre after the chores and everything, the mopping the floor. I can't talk. I think faster than I talk sometimes. But she was in ACOTAR, she was in ACOWAR when Eris was trying to protect her from Beron during the High Lords meeting. And her family was known to be very elite, which is why her parents wanted her to marry Beron and have powerful children, because of her fire power. But she could also be a witch. And what makes me say that is that when Eris was giving us hints about himself and how he's not actually a bad person, he was saying, don't believe the lies they tell you about me. And I know that was in reference to Moore, but he also has a lot of dealings with Kier from the Court of Nightmares. We know that Moore has been called a queen. Moore has been called super powerful. We know that Eris and Moore were supposed to get married, which means Eris is at least as powerful as Moore is. So if he had fae powers and witch powers, that would make him very powerful as well. He's also said, you know, about the day Jasminda died and about other situations, like, you know nothing about what happened, and he told Moore that in making a deal with Kier not to come to Valaris because she was scared that he would come there, he's like, you have no idea what I had to give up to keep him. I think that Kier would benefit a lot from having a witch on his side, and I think that's part of his alliance with Eris. Again, we don't know what that's about. We know that Eris almost got engaged to Moore once, as I said, and he still cares about her. I do think they're rejected mates. That's a whole other theory of mine that I'll have to do a video on at some point. I think they're rejected mates because they were equal in power, because I at this point I think that Eris is half witch and half fae. Fae from Beron and fae witch from Lady Autumn. And even Devlon, when Nesta goes to Illyria, he points out that she's a witch, openly. He calls her a witch, and everyone assumes that it's because he's just sensing her cauldron power. But I don't think it was just cauldron power. Going back to Akamath, we had to listen to Azrael tell Feyre about the Illyrians and how he says they're technically called Lesser Fae, but they're really other. So I think it was the otherness that was calling out to Nesta's witchiness, and how she had like a cold aura about her. And if we go back to the part in Akawar, I don't know what chapter it's in, but when they're talking about the Bog of Orid, they say that the High Lords had banished witches there like centuries ago, and they used to drink young blood to banish the coldness of the magic in them. And we knew that Nesta had very cold flames, silver flames, as ingrained into her fae power. And that is where my main point comes in, finally. So we know that Nesta's silver flames were ingrained into her fae powers, which were entwined with the power of death. That's how she made Ataraxia and the other knife. She infused it with death. Lanthus called her Queen of Queens, like the Queen of Death. So she has cold flames, which symbolize death. Eris has hot flames, which could symbolize, you know, harvest, abundance, things associated with the Autumn Court. Flames and flames, plus the flames on the dresser, equal Nesta and Eris. And not only that, but Autumn with growth and plentifulness. And while Eris does wield fire from his mother, and Beron, even though his mother's is stronger, because I think she's half witch, we don't know what other powers he has. Like Tamlin had shapeshifting, he had wind powers. Rhys has, you know, misting and manifestation, and, you know, a lot of these High Lords and High Lord heirs have more than one power. We only saw Eris's fire so far. So I think one of his other powers could be, like, growth, kind of like a green thumb, if you will, which tracks, because if you look up, like, Autumn on Google, which is what I did, it will tell you that in literature and in myth, autumn symbolizes, as I said, harvest, abundance, growth, plentifulness. And on the flip side, it also symbolizes decay, decline, death. You know, the leaves are dying and falling off the trees, but at the same time we have this growth of harvest, which I believe is Eris and Nesta, two sides of that one coin of autumn. Eris would be the harvest, Nesta would be the decay, which I think is awesome, because also orange flames and silver flames, life and death, growth and decay. That to me says equals more than her and Cassian. And I would like to see more interactions between Nesta and Eris, because I couldn't really make a distinction on how they would truly be together, because we really only got that one dance, and I wanted more just so that I could see how I liked them together. Because yeah, I think at this point, putting everything together, her and Eris are much more of what mates should be than her and Cassian. Another clue that Sarah J. Maas put in there was in Akasif. I actually have the quote here. I'm kind of blind, so pardon me. It says, "A brisk autumn breeze flowed past, bringing with it its scents from the city below. Bread and cinnamon and oranges, roast meats and salt. Nesta inhaled, identifying each one, wondering how they could all somehow combine to create a singular sense of autumn." That was a very random quote to me, because there was no need to put it in. And not for nothing, but here in the real world, what do we usually equate with autumn? Like, what's the first thing you think of when you think of the fall, autumn? For me, it's Halloween. So it would be skeletons, death, pumpkins, which is harvest, witches, Nesta's a witch, Eris might be a witch. They had Cassian basically tell him he's a good guy. We have Nesta not really being an equal to Cassian at any point. They're still arguing at the end of Akasif. So if Cassian dies, it's going to be Eris. Also, as I said in my Cassian video, I think that because she got her final goodbye in Akawar with Cassian, and they basically said that whole "I'll find you in the next life" thing, and she won't be able to sink into her depression because I think she's going to be pregnant at that point. I think it's very telling that Cassian was the person to see Eris for who he is and to call him out for, just being afraid of Beron, and pretending to be a bad person. And I think if Nesta is pregnant and she ends up with Eris, I don't think he would reject her or the baby. And I know some of you are probably Eris haters, and they're like, oh, well, he called Cassian a bastard, he's as bad as Beron, blah, 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 blah. But I don't believe that. And the reason I don't believe that is because we got clues that the Vansera brothers know that Lucian is actually Helions. Because Lucian says in Akatar, what do you think made them want to break and kill me so badly? Which leads me to believe that maybe Lucian knows too, but that's another issue. And we know that Eris is actually very protective of Lucian. Lucian doesn't know that, sadly. But Eris saved him when his other brothers and Beron wanted to kill him after they killed Jasminda. He got word to Tamlin to help save Lucian. Eris protects his mother, who he knew had an affair with Helion and then had Lucian. So I don't think Eris would ever reject Nesta or reject her baby that she has with Cassian, simply because he knows Lucian is a bastard too. And he knows how Beron found out and terribly abused Lady Autumn for it, belittling her and leaving bruises on her and all of that stuff. And Eris is always like, I'm nothing like my father. I'm not my father. You know, I want to kill my father. I want to take over so Autumn will be better. So I think he would actually be a really good, like, stepfather if Nesta was pregnant with Cassian's baby. Just because, like, he saw how Lucien was treated by Beron. He knows how he's treated by Beron. He knows how his mother was treated by Beron. And he knows that, you know, despite everything, Cassian and Nesta do love each other in their own way. And that the baby would have been, you know, created in love like his baby brother was. So I think that's going to really kind of tug at his heartstrings. That's going to make him want to get rid of Beron faster. Along with how I think Gwen is his daughter, which really infuses the whole bastard thing. Which is why I think that's probably the worst insult, because just the context of all of it and how awful the situations can be when they have a baby out of wedlock, and the implications of that in Prythian, and especially with High Lords. But I really think we're going to see a softer part of Eris, and I think he could end up with Nesta. And I don't think he called Cassian a bastard to hurt him, really. I think it was more to hurt himself, if that makes any sense, because we know Cassian saw through his mask. And Eris was literally squirming from being beaten by Beron. I think calling Cassian a bastard kind of makes him tell himself that he's more like Beron than he wants to be. I think it's kind of him beating himself up in some twisted way, because living with Beron definitely has to have its psychological effects as well as its physical effects. But in the long run, he would not be like Beron. He would adore his kids. He would adore Nesta's kids if she had with Cassian. And another thing that kind of connects Eris and Cassian is that when Cassian and Nesta were kind of in the beginning stages, and Nesta still didn't really like him, but was his mate and was jealous, Mor would be draping herself all over him and kind of getting between them. We know that Eris and Mor almost got married, and I mentioned thinking that they're rejected mates, and I just thought that was funny because Mor drapes herself over Cassian to get between Cassian and Nesta, but then Eris realizes that Mor and Cassian are chummy, and he's kind of upset about it. So it's like both of them, both Eris and Nesta, are pissed off that Cassian and Mor have this unspoken thing that is really weird that they shouldn't have still. And Eris calls them out on it. I didn't know Illyrians were in the habit of fucking their sisters. The way I laughed my ass off the first time I read that, guys, I was like, oh my god. But it's true. Cassian and Mor have this weird thing, and it pisses off both Eris and Nesta, because Eris is Mor's rejected mate, and Nesta was Cassian's mate at the time, which is another thing that just ends up connecting Nesta and Eris. Eris is a rejected mate. If Cassian dies, Nesta would no longer have her mate. So neither of them would have their mate. Both of them would have, Autumn Court power, Harvest and Decay. They both seem to be witches. Eris was engaged to Mor because she was a queen. We see in the Cauldron scene how the King of Highburn, calls Mor, oh, the beautiful queen, and, you know, the queen that never was, and like shit like that. Very cryptic stuff. Which kind of tracks because we know that Mor's bloodline was the original High Lord bloodline of the Night Court. Personally, I think her bloodline was probably the Dust Court when the Dust Court was a thing. But we know that her power had to be equal to Eris's power for their parents to create an alliance, for them to get married and have like super powerful children, which Mor didn't want because she loves women romantically, and Eris knows that. Yeah, I mean, Lanthus calls Nesta a queen. The Bone Carver calls her Queen of Queens. And I think that's part of the reason why Mor was so jealous and threatened by her. Because she could rival her in power. We still don't know what Mor's power of truth is. I did another video on that. I did a theory video on that if you want to check it out. So I think I know what her power is, but it's not canon, obviously. It's just my theory. But yeah, Mor and Nesta are equal in power, which is another clue that Eris and Nesta might end up together because Eris and Mor were supposed to end up together. And because she loves women, she rejected him. That's how I see it. They're able to scent each other when one of them has already left, which is common in mates. And I know I'm kind of just babbling at this point. But yeah, I think Eris sees an equal in Nesta. And unfortunately, because Mor is also his equal and was obviously born Fae, that they were fated mates instead of him and Nesta. But because she doesn't want him, you know, Eris probably doesn't think he'll ever get the chance to have anyone. And finding someone that actually can rival him in power or be a witch like him is probably a huge thing to him, which is why he tells Rhys, like, I will give you anything for Nesta. Please let me marry Nesta. Because he sees an opportunity to have someone as equal to him as Mor was. And he's like, anything? What about your firstborn? And Eris is like, well, not my firstborn, Gwen. Which is yet another point that I should have made earlier, back when I first said Gwen. My Eris and Gwen theory video is also on my page. Is that Eris's daughter is Gwen, who is one of the people that helped Nesta see that she could have her power back, and is Nesta's BFF. Which would just be really awesome. I don't know. I just think it would be really funny, because with everyone talking about the age gaps and how, like, you know, your grandfather can look the same age as you and all of that shit, I think it would be fucking hilarious if Nesta became Gwen's, like, stepmother. I don't know, I just think that would be so funny, and they could, like, joke about that at book club, and it would be hilarious. Especially, like, when they're talking about, like, men. And Gwen just has to be like, I can't be in this conversation because I can't listen to you talk about my father like that. And then Nesta would just fire back with, like, well, you're fucking my brother-in-law, like my old brother-in-law. So, you know, fair is fair. Which again brings me back to how I said I don't think Cassian and Nesta were equal mates. Azriel was so much kinder and sweeter and mate-like to Nesta than Cassian ever was. So that kind of threw me off. But yeah, even with the Azriel and Gwen thing, Eris and Az would have to get along too. I guess my logic is just like, if Cassian dies, it just makes sense because his arc is kind of over. And for all the reasons I had said in the previous video, And also, it would just be this, big, huge, convoluted storyline, with Eris and Nesta and Gwen and Azriel and Lucian and Lady Autumn and, Helion and, such like that. Like, we know that Lucian is Helion's son. Lucian is working with Helion to try to break the curse on Vassa. Vassa is connected to Elaine by her powers. But then we have, you know, Gwen being Eris's daughter, but Azriel being Gwen's mate. Azriel being Nesta's brother-in-law. And then we even have, you know, the whole Beron situation and how he's gonna die. And, as I said, like, Eris, Gwen, Azriel, Lucian, Helion, Vassa, Elaine, Koschei, and we know that Beron is now allied with Koschei and the Queens. And I think once he's dead, like, a lot of secrets are gonna come out. Like, everyone's gonna figure out how they're connected. Because they are all connected except for Cassian. Which is another reason why I think he's gonna die. They're literally all connected except Cassian. Which makes sense because I had said that the way Cassian is gonna die is in this war with the Queens and Koschei and Beron. And that just brings this whole entire thing full circle, because when Beron dies and Cassian dies, Eris is going to become High Lord. He's going to probably want a lady. He doesn't have a mate because Mor rejected him. Nesta won't have a mate because Cassian will be dead. Nesta's definitely not going to want to stay in the Night Court without Cassian having to relive her grief over it, especially probably once she becomes pregnant. I don't think Rhys and Feyre will be very happy with her wanting to leave, but hopefully, who knows, because they were assholes in Akasif, but hopefully they would respect her wishes, and I think that she will eventually find her way to Eris as mates. Chosen, like, mates. Like, I think she could be happy being Lady of the Autumn Court, or High Lady of the Autumn Court, if we're doing that now. And yeah, I don't think Eris would have a problem with raising a child that wasn't his, because, again, he loves Lucian. Lucian's his brother, regardless of Helion not being his father as well. They're still half-brothers. So I don't think he would really have any issue raising Cassian's son or daughter. And then, you know, marrying Nesta and all that. You have to admit, like, their aesthetic is perfect. They line up perfect. All the autumn stuff. And at that point, like, with Eris and Nesta being Lord and Lady of the Autumn Court, old Lady Autumn, I'm still pissed that she doesn't have a name, but Eris's mother could then go and be with her mate, Helion, in the Day Court with Lucian and Elaine, because that's where they belong. And I think that would just be a very good way and cohesive way to bring the story together. I remembered what I wanted to add, of course, so I'm going to interrupt myself real quick. So how I just said that it would end cohesively with Nesta in the Autumn Court, Elaine in the Day Court, and Feyre in the Night Court, that all circles back to my main point, which was SJM utilizing the dresser drawers again. 3 drawers, 3 sisters in 3 different courts. Running 3 different courts. Feyre would be the High Lady of the Night Court. Elaine would be one day the High Lady of the Day Court, because Lucian's the heir. And Nesta would be High Lady of the Autumn Court. Night Court drawer, Autumn Court drawer, Day Court drawer. Boom. Also, we have to remember from Book 1 in ACOTAR, the sisters were clearly not happy when they were stuck together. Obviously they love each other, they're sisters, like, they can handle each other in small doses, but all three of them have completely different personalities, as we know. So it would just make sense for all of them to end up in different places, and to have their own friend groups. We saw Feyre get the inner circle, we saw Nesta get the Valkyries, including Gwyn, which ties her to Eris, in my theory. And Elaine's is coming up. I'll do a theory video on Elaine's friend group. I have a lot to do. But I think it's gonna be like the spring inner circle, but I'll explain that later in another video. I'm curious why you guys see Nesta and Cassian being equals. I don't see anything that would lead anyone to believe that they're equals. Aside from, like, they can both banter, but anyone can banter. Eris can banter, too. But yeah, I think SJM throwing in that random line about Nesta enjoying the sense of autumn is really weird. Weird and interesting. And their dance was amazing. Yeah, they just make so much more sense. But yeah, I think if Cassian dies, or I'm pretty sure Cassian's gonna die, Nesta's definitely gonna end up with Eris. P.S. Just to make this abundantly clear to everybody, I don't mind Nesta with Cassian. I do think that they have their cute moments. I think they're very sexy. Akasif was okay. I did not like Cassian and Akasif at all. That's a me thing. Again, I don't think he acted like a mate, but I don't mind them together all in all. I think Akawar Nessian was superior. It was amazingly delicious, especially with the whole Cassian death goodbye scene, foreshadowing, and Elaine saying he's gonna die. So I don't mind them, and honestly, I have a crack ship for Eris and Nuon, that I really, really, really love, and obviously I would adore for it to be canon, but that's never gonna happen. But yeah, I don't mind Nessian. I'm back, because I can't shut my mouth. PPS, if you want me to drop a video on why I ship Eris and Nuon, drop it in the comments.